This is the Cliff Yates Show. Personal growth, motivation, inspiration, and philosophies for a great life.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Cliff Yates Show. You are in the right place, and I'm so happy you're here at this episode today. We are going to be reading from my book, Deputy, where I actually write about my life as a police officer, a deputy sheriff in upstate New York in the rural area south of Rochester, New York, a very small sheriff's department. And my perspective coming from there all the way out to the largest sheriff's department in the world, the LA County Sheriff's Department. How did I get from New York to Hollywood? How did I get from New York to LA? It was a big decision, and so let's talk about that. And I'm reminded of some of these stories because I'm actually rewriting my book, Deputy. I had some errors that were still in the manuscript. I didn't have the original, so in order to upload a new manuscript to Amazon, I have to rewrite the whole book. But what it does for me is it reminds me of some of the stories I recounted in the book. So I'm actually reliving those memories, and I thought I would share some of those today, getting from New York to LA, and how that might help you, and how there were some lessons learned as I look back on those big decisions that I made. Or one of the principles for success, they tell you, is be quick to make decisions and slow to change them. Be quick to make decisions and slow to change them. And I had to make a quick decision when I had decided whether I was actually going to take the job at the LA Sheriff's Department or not. And it was a really big decision. And as I read that chapter, big decision, you're going to see how tough that was. But I'm so glad that I made it. It really caused me to grow in ways that I never could have imagined. And so that's why I want to encourage you, and to keep encouraging myself, to keep striving and thriving and keep reaching forward. And you live until you die. That's what we're going to do. And that's what I'm talking about today, because let's face it, you, me, all of us, especially you, you're part of the human race, regardless of creed, color, religion, left-handed, right-handed, regardless of that. And you do share all these things as we do as a human race. You are someone who is individual. You're specific. God created you as alone. You are a one-of-a-kind knockoff. You are a special one that were created to create. And it's evidenced. If you don't believe it in the Bible sense, look at the science sense, where, come on, DNA, fingerprints, it's obvious, proven, you're one of a kind. And so take that power that you can't. The power is always there, whether you make the choice to tap into it. It's up to you. And so how did I get from New York to LA? I mean, brought up in upstate New York, little village of Caledonia, New York. And my dad was a cop in that little village where he had 3 police officers on his force. And years before that, he had worked on the Livingston County Sheriff's Department, where I ended up working for 5 years. And we had, and this is the perspective that I talk about in this book, and the book is available on Amazon, Kindle ebook. You can get the paperback, and you can get it on audio book. And as I said, I'm rewriting the manuscript, so I'm going to keep it at a discounted price right now with some minimal errors still in it to this day, but it will be uploaded at the end of November with hopefully 0. And so I provided a link where you can get the book in any of those formats, and the link is in the YouTube description, and it's also in the show notes on all the podcast platforms. Click the link, get the book, and you can read about my journey, a true life memoir of myself as a deputy sheriff in upstate New York, and traveling out to Los Angeles, where I worked for 30 years at the largest sheriff's department in the world, and some of the events and the things that I experienced along the way, and a lot of lessons learned, and that's why I'm going over that today. New York to LA, end up joining the Livingston County Sheriff's Department in Geneseo, New York, 20 deputies, and that was 1978. And there was always a yearning. There was always a space there that I wanted to get to a metropolitan area. I wanted to get to a big city police department, and that kind of came out of movies that I kept watching over again, and books that I read, Joseph Wambaugh books on Los Angeles, books I read about NYPD and New York City. And so that got me to put those dominating thoughts in my mind And after 5 years in rural upstate New York, I actually got into a little bit of a funk, a little bit, I don't know if you could call it depression or sadness, but definitely I was at a turning point. And as I learned much later, when you get to that point where I don't want to take this anymore, this is the end, that's it. That's when you have the leverage on yourself to take massive action. So it's a good thing. That's another lesson you can learn, is that when you get to a point, hey, I'm not going to take this anymore, we need those points in our life, because that's when we're going to take massive action, or we're willing to step out of our comfort zone and take big steps towards a big goal. And so that's what I did. I'm so happy I did it, but it was not easy. In the long run, looking back, I couldn't have asked for anything better. Not only did it enrich and cause me to grow, it really enriched and positively affected everyone around me. And that's what can happen for you. So I'm going to encourage you, if you're on the brink or you're thinking of making a big move, make it, because you can always make a decision shortly thereafter to change it, go back to where you were, but you can never look back and get rid of the sour taste of regret. That can never change. But listen, be quick to make a decision, slow to change it, because when I made that big decision, I had to make it quick, and I'll talk about that in the book. I started to have, buyer's remorse. Maybe I shouldn't do this. I think I'm going to stay. I'm going to change my mind, but I was kind of slow, and by the time I even had the opportunity to do that, I was already in Los Angeles, entering the LA Sheriff's Department Academy. And so I was glad I made the decision quickly, slow to change it. You think you're alone. You think there's nobody thinking like you. Hey, there's nobody that wants to do this with me. And that was the way I was when I was making the decision to leave upstate New York, home and family. I was established in my job and quit, make the big step out to LA. But then I got out there and I met a guy by the name of Mike Gray. He had gone to the same high school that I did. And here he was. He made the big move. I didn't know it at the time because we had lost touch after high school. And here he was making that same decision. So it would have been nice if we had hooked up and got together and went on that journey together. But as it turned out, we hooked up out there in California, and we decided, hey, look where we came from, and here we are. And so you never know who's in the same boat that you are. And so that's what happened. So I'm going to go to the big decision. So I was in high school. Let me set the stage a little bit, right? And I talk about in the book how I started memorizing comedy routines that I would see on TV. I would actually perform these comedy routines for my classes in high school. And I ended up, I wanted to be an athlete. I had trouble. I was too skinny for football. I didn't make the basketball team, but they hired me to be the announcer for the basketball games. And I loved doing that. I loved being on the mic at the basketball games, and I really thrived doing that. Hey, I couldn't make these physical athletic teams that I really wanted to be a part of, but I put in for drama class, and they picked me, and I auditioned for 2 plays, got picked, and so that really was where my true heart belonged, and that's where I thrived, and that's where I had true talents in those arenas. And so I had a couple teachers that were encouraging me, hey, you know what? You should actually go to Los Angeles. You want to be in the entertainment industry, you should go out to LA. So I did have some encouragement from teachers to make a move that would happen many years later. But other than that, there was no support that I had to make that decision except in my own head. But of course, when I did that, I had family that was behind me 100%, and friends and people I worked with. But to get to that point, of course, I was brought up around police officers, cops. My dad was the chief of police in my hometown. My uncle was he was actually a police officer in Geneseo, New York. And so I was around those guys all the time at the kitchen table, laughing and joking. These guys loved their jobs. And my dad had been a deputy for Livingston County. And I remember him getting dressed to go to work when I was like 5, 6 years old, and he would leave to go on the night shift. He ended up leaving police work for about 2 years and got into the private industry where, of course, you could make a lot more money. But you know what? He wasn't happy. That did not feed his soul. He missed the police work. He ended up going back to the village of Caledonia, which caused us to move there from just outside of Rochester, New York. So 10, 11 years old. And here I am in village of Caledonia, growing up, start doing comedy for my class. And I'm really kind of thriving in the entertainment as far as being involved in some school plays. And I'm calling the basketball games. I'm on the mic. And so I'm liking what's happening and as far as this is concerned. And so when I graduate, it was natural for me to, in high school, I went to a law enforcement, a school, like a technical school, and it taught us law enforcement and criminal justice is what it taught us in our final year of high school. And then from there, I went to Monroe Community College outside of Rochester, took criminal justice. And age 20, I was hired part-time by the Livingston County Sheriff's Department. And at age 21, I got hired full-time for the Livingston County Sheriff's Department. Age 21, and now I'm working the road patrol by myself for the whole county, right? 500 square miles and 20 deputies, as I told you, really rural. We had no cities in the county. We had about 50,000 residents. And I think the largest village, maybe Geneseo, they have a big college there. So during the college school year, maybe Geneseo might have 15,000 residents. That would be the biggest city that we had, which wasn't a city. It was a village. But it would swell to about 10, 15,000. And then when college was out, it would go back down, I think, around 5,000, 6,000 people. And that's where the Sheriff's Department was. And so I worked there for 5 years, had a great reputation. And I worked a night shift for most of my time. And I loved it on the night shift, working those midnight to 8 shifts. And, man, I just had the yearning to go to a bigger department. Now I'm I'm 25 years old now. And so the big decision came. So what happened was, it was a couple turning points when I really said, I got to get out of here. I have got to get out of this place. Now, when I was 19 or 20, I had gone to visit my grandmother in West Palm Beach, Florida. And I remember it was February, and I flew down with my cousin to visit my grandmother, West Palm Beach. We left, it was 17 degrees. I'll never forget it. Got down to West Palm Beach. We actually landed in Miami Airport, and it was 82 degrees. I'm thinking 2 hours, 50 minutes earlier, I was in 17 degrees weather, and now I'm in 82 degrees. And I'm down by the water, and it's just a beautiful, I remember going out at night and just the warm breeze off the water. It's still 78 degrees, and it's 10 o'clock at night. I'm thinking, this is where I have to be. I have to live in a warm climate. I got to get out. That is it, man. I got to get out of there. And so that was always a dominating thought in my mind in the future. And then working patrol for Livingston County, I remember one call I was on, and it's in the book. I was on a call for a stolen car, and I was inside taking the report. And when I went outside, walking down the steps, and the steps, in between each steps, that was packed with snow, which had hardened into ice. And I slipped on those steps, and it was like a cartoon. My feet flew up in the air, flat on my back. And I remember laying there for about 5 minutes. It was probably only 2 minutes, but I remember laying there staring up at the falling snow thinking, I got to get out of here. I cannot work under these conditions anymore. And it was shortly after that I was I was going out to my car to work my midnight shift, and they gave me a car that hadn't been driven in about maybe 3 or 4 shifts. So on that car, it was cold, and the snow was this deep on the hood and on the windshield. And I just remember taking that big push broom, and I was pushing snow back and forth off the hood of my sheriff's car. And at the time, we all had to wear these open at the top, these boots. They were like just ankle high, and they were open at the top. So I remember I pulled snow off the hood, and they filled my shoes. And then they gave me an accident call to go on, and I couldn't see out of my windshield. I had chipped away at the ice in the windshield, and I turned on the defroster. If you've ever grown up in a snowy area, you know what I'm talking about. Defroster's on full blast, and I make that small hole as it starts to get bigger and bigger, and I finally can see enough, and I'm driving to my accident scene. what am I doing in this godforsaken weather? Believe me, it was a great, wonderful experience in the Livingston County Sheriff's Department, but these little experiences were pushing more to making a decision. There was another night, 3 a.m., and it had been 2 hours. I hadn't seen a car yet. I was at a U-turn on Route 390 near Dansville, New York, in Livingston County. And I'm sitting there, and the only car I saw for 2 hours was a snowplow. And I thought to myself, I'm going to kill myself. This is crazy. I can't do this anymore. I'm really getting into my own head. So I would be reading these police magazines, and I saw an ad for the NYPD. They were giving a test. And during that time, this is 1982, there was a big boom in Houston, Texas. They were hiring police officers. There was a big recruitment for them. Dallas PD, NYPD, LA Sheriff, LAPD, Daytona Beach, Fort Lauderdale. So the country was really in an expansion. 1982, people were hiring all over the place, but specifically Houston PD, LA definitely hiring, and obviously from my experience visiting my grandmother, I applied Fort Lauderdale and in Miami, Dade County, and so I remember I got the examination card to go to New York City. Now here we were in upstate New York. We are about a 5-6 hour drive from New York City. I had never been to New York City before. 1982. Can you imagine? It was 1982. And so I'm going to New York City, and I'm going with my mom and my aunt. We get on the train, take it down to New York City. 82 was a time in New York City. It was not a good time. I would say that the crime rate in New York City was probably a lot higher than it is today. And Times Square was a mess. It was peep shows. It was pickpockets, a lot of crime, stabbings, Grand Central Station, homeless people laying all over the place. It was really a seedy time in New York. And it was a mere 10 years later, 10 years later when Giuliani took over, and he came in and cleaned up. And when I went back to New York City, it was almost unrecognizable when Giuliani cleaned up New York City, specifically Manhattan. And Times Square now was full of tourists. You know, the Broadway district, the theater district was in full force. Grand Central Station, coffee shops, cleaned out, no homeless, and just a beautiful place to go. And so it remained that way until the recent couple years. And it's still okay, but it's dangerous. And it's getting to the point it was in 1982 when they were hiring a lot of police officers. And I went there to take the NYPD test. Now, I took the written test at the Norman Thomas High School on Lexington Avenue in Manhattan. And then I went back to Livingston County. And in the meantime, I had put applications out to the LA Sheriff's Department. I'm looking at the Police Product News magazine, and I see an ad, full page ad, right? 2 sides of the magazine. And it just had a big LA County Sheriff's patrol car, and it had the Sunset Strip. It had some building. It said, "Ride the Strip, we pay the gas." And that's really what prompted me to call the number, 1-800-BE-A-DEPUTY. And I got my application package. I was so excited. I filled it all out, sent it back in. And then at the time, LA had a out-of-state program. So they would test all the out-of-staters in 4 days. So you got everything done in 4 days. And then you would go back home. And then if the background investigator got your package, and then you could either take the polygraph test when you got in the academy, or you could fly out and take it, which I decided to do. And that's what happened. I'm going to go to the big decision and how hard that was for me to make that decision, because then later on the call came in. The LA Sheriff's Department, like 6 months later, the call just comes to you. You're going about your business. I'm working my job at the Livingston County Sheriff's Department, and the call comes in. From my book, The Deputy, Big Decision. Everyone at the Sheriff's Department knew that I went out to Los Angeles to test for the Sheriff's Department. I was in my 5th year on the department, and I was very close to my mom and dad, along with lifelong friends. Detective Jack York, who would go on to be the next sheriff of Livingston County, he met with me to discuss my decision. He actually says, "Hey, I want to meet with you. I got some things I want to ask you and talk to you about." And this is what he said to me. I even quoted this in the book. "You have been here 5 years, Cliff, and you've developed a great reputation. You've done great work here. Are you sure you want to walk away from that? I mean, this is a really big decision. He then added, there are victims everywhere, Cliff, who need good police officers to respond to their aid. So wherever you decide to serve, you will be an asset to the department. That had a big impact on me, and he really made me reflect on my decision. And so I really wasn't sure at that point what I was going to do, because he got me thinking, as everyone else did. I had several of these visits from trusted friends and advisors who were causing me to take pause, which in retrospect was a good thing. My mom and dad were just always supportive of whatever I wanted to do, and they really wanted me to be happy in whatever I did. They never said a discouraging word to any of my endeavors. My mom was born in San Diego and lived in Los Angeles for several years, so when I broached the subject to my grandma Schnurr, she said, "Oh dear, you will love it in California. It's a great place, and you will have all sorts of adventures." This was my worldly grandma who had lived and traveled all over the world, so her word carried great weight because I know of her experience. This was a definite intention on my part to have adventures, to create new memories. I didn't have all my eggs in one basket, right? I had applications to many other police agencies in warm climates. Of course, I had submitted, as I said earlier, to Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Dallas, Houston police departments. In the early 80s, Houston was really booming, right, because of the oil business. And so they really had to push on. And they were aggressively recruiting nationwide. The LA Sheriff's Department, as I said, they were on top of things, man. They had a system that was down to test the out-of-staters. It was December 1st, 1983. And I was watching TV in my apartment in Caledonia when I got a phone call. And the voice said, "This is the LA Sheriff's Department. Do you want a job?" In that very moment. Can you imagine? I'm laying on the couch. I'm watching a little TV. Phone rings, right? I'm running to the phone, see who it is. Now, I'm still working full time for Livingston County. "Hello, this is the LA Sheriff's Department. You want a job?" This is how it was asked to me. Do you want a job? In that very moment, I didn't know how I was going to answer. I was caught off guard, and the person on the phone spoke in a stern manner when they asked the question. Out of the blue, I said, "Yes." He asked me, I didn't even know I was going to say yes, by the way. In that moment, I didn't know because I had been waffling, I had been pausing. But I made a quick decision, and I was slow to change it, which turned out to be a good thing, right? That's the principle we talked about earlier. He asked me how much time I needed. So I said yes, and he said, "Well, how much time do you need?" Then I really didn't know what to say. I told him I needed a few weeks to give notice to the department and get things in order. I mean, at the time, right, that was kind of a standard operation. You gave people 2 weeks' notice before you left your job and went on to a new one. So I know I need at least 2 weeks. So I said, I need a few weeks. He gave me the impression they needed me to start right away. He said, "Be at the sheriff's headquarters, 211 West Temple Street in Los Angeles on December 21st at 8 a.m. December 21st, 1983, 4 days before Christmas. I'm thinking that's when the academy starts. They need me there. That was my starting date. Of course, later I find out that my academy class would not start until January 27th, 1984. Did I really need to be there 4 days before Christmas? Of course not, but that's not the way he broached it to me. That guy, what I wrote in the book was, what an asshole. I didn't need to be there. December 21st, I would find out that a department of almost 10,000 deputies, they had more than a few assholes. So the big decision had been made. I made it in that instant. And you might have to make that decision yourself too. It might just come down to that. If you're auditioning somewhere or you're putting a job in somewhere around the country, you might get that call. And what are you going to do? So think long and hard before you get the call. It'd be better if you made that decision beforehand. I had not made that decision until that voice said, "Do you want a job?" And I just, yes. The big decision had been made. My friends from the Livingston County Sheriff's Department had a big party for me, gave me gifts. I still have a special stein with my years of service on it from the Livingston County Sheriff's Department that I look at from time to time and think of the night that they gave it to me. We had a party at a local bar, and at the time I had a 1979 Chevy Impala with T-tops, and my plan was to drive to California where they stopped in Kansas City, Missouri, where my cousin Bobby and his wife Joan were living. I packed up the car and said my goodbyes to Mom and Dad. It was pretty emotional, but I made it. My next stop was in Rochester, New York. I visited my good friend Tom Basile, his wife, and a couple of friends. We had coffee, and then they presented me with a gold keychain that was inscribed, "Don't forget us." Never forget that. Driving away and seeing my friends in the rearview mirror, waving goodbye, broke me up. I drove the rest of the day and continued driving through the night, except for a couple stops to rest my eyes. I drove for 24 hours before checking into a motel. I drove for 24 hours straight. I pulled over a couple times just to rest, but other than that, I just kept driving. I stayed over at a motel, and the next day I made it to Kansas City, Missouri, where I visited my cousin, and they took me to Kansas City, Kansas, across a bridge, and they had a beautiful Christmas decoration area where the street is all decorated, and it's pretty famous, I guess. And then the next day I headed out again and stayed overnight somewhere. I actually went through Colorado, Vail, Colorado. I remember the snow was like 10 feet tall on both sides. I ended up in the Colorado mountains for like 5 hours. I had 2 wheels off the side of the road because I could not see. Later, I was told that was very dangerous, and I should have never even gone that northern route. People ask me, why did you go that route? I checked with AAA, and they gave me a triptych, and that's the route they told me to take. And so that was the wrong way to go. I could have been killed going through those Colorado mountains. And I remember my first time driving through Las Vegas. To see those lights in Las Vegas was really exciting, and I grew to love Las Vegas. And so that was 1983. And so the next site was going over the hill and seeing the skyline of Los Angeles. The site I'll always remember. And I remember who was on the radio too. Rick Dees in the morning. It was a morning. I remember the sun was at my back. And I just remember Kellogg Hill is the big hill as you come over on the 10 freeway going in towards Los Angeles. 10 freeway westbound, and seeing the LA skyline for the first time. And this was it. I wasn't coming out to test or visit anyone. I was now living here. Los Angeles, the city of angels. And that's it. That's how I got from New York to LA. And then the rest is in this book. Get the book, and it's going to be discounted now because there's a few typos still in there, even though I had several people go over it and several editors. Amazon still reports a couple, and I found a couple. So I'm rewriting the transcript, which has reminded me of some of these stories. And so I thought I'm going to do an episode today on how I got from New York to LA on this adventure in the LA Sheriff's Department. And here we are some 40 years later, and you can read these adventures in this book. And so click the link in the description if you're listening or watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms, I'm going to put the link in the show notes so you can get the book and you can either read and or hear the full story, because the book is available like this, paperback, ebook, and it's also an audiobook. So however you want to check it out. And please leave me a review on Amazon after you read the book. It's always welcomed, and I'll appreciate it. So, hey, thanks for this episode. That was the story of how I got from New York, upstate New York, in the rural upstate county of Livingston County, out to the largest sheriff's department in the world, L.A., and that's how that adventure came to be. And I encourage you, if you're on the brink of making a decision on a similar type of adventure, a big move, I'm telling you, make it. Be quick to make that decision, slow to change it. You're never going to regret it. As sad, as hard as it was to make this decision, you know, in the end, some of those friends ended up coming out to L.A. Tom Basile, he ended up riding in my sheriff's car with me. He ended up walking on the beaches of L.A. with me. My mom and dad ended up coming out to L.A. and riding along with me. My last year on the department, they made several visits out to L.A. My mom was able to visit the home where she grew up as a young girl, spent several years, and the people let her into the house. And so when you take on new adventures, you're going to affect the people around you in a positive way. So things that are going to make you grow and become more, you're going to be sharing those with family, friends, and everybody around you. you're going to have a positive impact. And that's what I encourage you to do. Have a positive impact on everybody else. Hey, everybody, please subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the show. Please, if you think somebody might benefit from hearing an episode, share it with them, and I will see and or you will hear me on the next episode.